Good evening, and thank you very much to everybody who has joined us to discuss the water crisis in Johannesburg and more broadly in Gauteng. My name is Ferial Haffajee. I'm a journalist who focuses mostly on Johannesburg with the Daily Maverick. Joining us is really our two guests who are right in the war rooms of water and will be, I am convinced, the best possible panel we can have to tell us exactly what is happening and to whom you can pose your questions. We're joined by the Deputy Minister of Water and Sanitation, Mr. David Mahlobo. Very welcome, sir. Thank you for making time this evening. And we're also joined by Dr. Miriam Altman, who is the convener for the Platform for a Water Secure Gauteng. And as an infrastructure specialist and someone who I've known for a very long time, I do think that we couldn't have our crisis in better hands than hers. So thank you so much to both of you for joining us. I thought that Deputy Minister, you could go first by just painting for us the scale of the crisis we're in, and then also sketching for us what the plan is to get us out of it. I know that there are Sunday meetings. I know that it's occupying a lot of attention and time. I thought you might share some of that with us.
No, thank you very much, Ferial, and thanks to Dr. Miriam and to the people that you are hosting, and just also to convey our sincere gratitude to the Daily Maverick team. The situation in Gauteng is untenable, and it has to be defined as a water crisis. But we have to define the matter on twofold, Ferial. One of the issues that we need to confirm is that, are we running out of water in Gauteng? The reality is that Gauteng is supplied by water in terms of the integrated Vaal River system. That system is very stable, in as much as at this stage, I can indicate that we're about 32% of the available water in the system on the basis of high consumption, but also on the basis of evaporation, because the manner in which that dam was actually designed and built is very long in terms of width and wide and length. But when it comes to the issues of structural in terms of the depth, is not so deep as other dams. But at this stage, we'll have to indicate that the system in Free State, the Sterkfontein that is supplied from KZN, is on standby and is full. In as much as we might have closed the tunnel in Lesotho, it doesn't have an impact. The biggest problem we have is water use inefficiency that is happening in Gauteng. The water use inefficiency in the main has been the leadership issues around local government that certainly does have made a decision to do nothing about the problem. Because in the main, there's a problem of infrastructure in Gauteng, which has a number of aspects that the infrastructure never catered for growth. It never looked at the economic growth and the population growth that came in. But at the very same time, the lifespan of that infrastructure, it has not been maintained. Then there's an issue about societal behavior around how much water we use. Gauteng, compared to other parts of our country, they are using close to 280 liters per person per day, while in South Africa, we are using about 218, which is still very high as compared to the world average of about 173. And what has happened is that when there were problems in Gauteng, one of the things we did, there was an overconsumption. We allowed rainwater to extract more than the license that were given. Their license was to allow them to extract about 4.1 billion liters per day that they can treat in their system. We allowed them currently to take about 5.5 billion liters per day. And out of the 5.5 billion liters per day, 2.5 billion is lost in the system in Gauteng, which is about 48%, more than the national average on how much water is being lost, because the three metros combined, they are taking the biggest chunk. That's what has happened in Gauteng. But at the very same time, there have been issues that the infrastructure, the reservoirs, they've been being bypassed. They are not sufficient. The booster pumps, they're not working. But we don't want to discuss more of problems. What has happened now, there is a leadership. For the first time, the Premier of Gauteng, working with all municipalities, with our minister, and I've addressed councillors, all of them in Gauteng, in Bedford. Therefore, there is a coordination in Gauteng now. But at the very same time, there are turnaround plans that have been produced, and Gauteng can be in a position to avert day zero. We did it in Cape Town. We also did it in Nelson Mandela Bay. What are the solutions? Gauteng must make a decision that they are going to reduce their water consumption. For an example, rainwater currently per annum, they are taking about 1,800 cubic meters. That must be reduced to 1,500. They must be able to say over what period can we be able to reduce that. There are three elements that if they agree, what is the figure, whether they reduce that at least by 20% or 30% over a particular period, and it's possible. One, the intervention must be technical intervention. In the technical intervention, it has to deal with all the issues that are infrastructure related. In the meantime, they must be able to impose issues of restricting the system. That's why they're at level 1. But that infrastructure, Ferial, it will not work if they don't use technology. They must deploy something called flow restrictors, that you can be able to sit at your home, you're able to do that. Therefore, they are starting to put some of those elements, Johannesburg Water. They must also do the issue of pressure management. A number of these networks in Gauteng, the pressure reducing valves are not there. They have to deploy most of them. They must also be in a position to deploy just to fix the valves, including in people's homes. They must also be able to minimize the issues of leaks. The leaks are divided. There are those bulk leaks where the big pipes, they burst, and it takes time in some of the corners. They are not being fixed. Then the small leaks, where you need to fix them quickly before they become much bigger. Then the biggest matter in Gauteng, they must do pipe replacement. They must have the budget to deal with those issues. Then there are mechanisms where we work with Giselle, work with Miriam in the partnership issues that we're working with them to give solution. The second issue is water restrictions, and including the tariffs. When you do the water restrictions, you must look from end to end. There's a component of the entire network that is from the water boards to the municipality, in the public entities, until in people's homes. If you don't do that, you will not be able to achieve that. Our own experience is that affluent areas, they are using more kiloliters per month as compared to areas that are poor. Then you can actually give an incentive to say that those who are going to actually use less water, be able to produce more, they need to do those things. The last component is the issue about behavioral change. The relationship between the consumers of Gauteng, between them and water. One of the issues around the relationship, we need to do consumer education, more communication that we need to do. We must be able to do enforcement, also implement the issues of imposing tariffs and hit them in their pockets. You can't have citizens themselves, they must be able to make a determination. If I'm using 280 liters per day as a person, then there must be a target to say, how do I come down to about 170? I can even come down to probably about 150 liters per person per day. Those are some of the issues that, as a Minister of Water, we're very confident that if they are implemented, we'll see a change.
So thank you very much. A quick follow-up and then I'll get to you, Miriam. So Deputy Minister, I have 1,000 questions, but I will ask this one. Don't you think that there's a lot of victim blaming here? There's a lovely cartoon by the cartoonist Rico about Joburg recently. He lives down the road here, and he's got this like people in Gauteng, a guy filling up a bucket of water from a tap, because that's pretty common now. And then a huge water leak there, and then Joburg Water saying to us, you have to stop using so much water. Our system is completely shattered, and 50% of the reservoirs leak. Our pipes are from the 50s and 60s. We haven't had proper pipe replacement. Are any heads going to roll, or are we just going to leave the same people who made the problem to fix the problem?
Most of these problems, Ferial, they are historical. And when they are historical, some of the people have left the system. We've inherited a system that is broken. But we are here now. We are the current leadership. We must accept assets and liabilities of what we found. That's why one of the biggest prerequisites of dealing with the problem was an issue that there has to be a leadership that is committed to resolve the particular problem. Therefore, the coordination that is happening in government is an important step. But at the very same time, leadership has to appreciate we don't have the monopoly of wisdom and all the answers. The mobilization of society experts like Miriam, Giselle, others, including bringing private sector on board, is an important issue that we're bringing. But we need to bring the entire civil society, because if we don't also use civil society, it's going to be able to take a collective effort to turn around. For an example, if we are going to reduce the offtake from the system of 1,800 cubic meters per annum to 1,500 cubic meters per annum, there are a number of actions that must be taken by different people, including industries, including ourselves. But we then have to be able to hold each other accountable. But we must be more transparent. The plan that is being put in place now, I'm very, very confident, but it will require resources. There is a backlog. For an example, in Johannesburg, you speak about old pipes. They are more than 60, 70 years old. There are only two things you can do.
We know they burst all the time.
There are two things you can do from asset management as a doctrine. If they are old, you have to replace them. Remember, there are issues of sinkholes there, they get fractured. And when they are still in good condition, you have to refurbish them. And that money, they don't have it. And when they don't have that money, we must be able to work with private sector. We remove this infrastructure in areas where there's an offtake. You guarantee access to service 99% of the time. But when there's a disruption of a 0.1%, the speed of responding, very, very important. But we must also build capable institutions. Building an entity like Johannesburg Water and other entities is going to be a very important component. There are men and women who have interacted there in this institution. They are capable. We have to change the issues of culture, but we must give them the tools of trade so they can do what they're supposed to do.
Thank you very much. Dr. Miriam Altman, now to bring you in here just with a small story, if I may. So in the WhatsApp group over where my mom lives, that's really an afflicted area. On Sunday, you know, I was so sad. Somebody put up a note saying, hey, just to let you all know that there won't be water today because there's unplanned maintenance at the Eikenhof pumping station. And there also won't be electricity. Those are very, very common notifications I see, Miriam, where most people don't even, where their water is more often off than it's on. Are these things that you're aware of as you sit convening this very important platform for water security in Gauteng?
So hugely aware of it. I mean, hugely aware how you can't miss it. I sent you a link to the dashboard so that people on, you know, who are here can be aware that we post information and we're trying to improve our information on leaks and system management. But equally, I shared WaterCan's map of leaks. You know, there is information and we're trying to get know more about it. I was just wondering, you know, I agree with what the Deputy Minister was saying. I was wondering if I could put some institutional meat on those bones.
Yes, please do.
Yeah, because I think that I just wanted to deepen what he's saying. I'm in agreement with everything he said. And I'm also aware, because he was talking, you wouldn't have seen, I'm looking down because I'm looking at my phone to see the messages that are coming through, just so people know. So they are getting fed. So I have that in mind as well, insofar as I can.
Thank you.
Now, the first thing is to understand, just, you know, essentially, I'm sorry to repeat things, but firstly, when we think about the problem, people ask, but the dams aren't empty. So why do we say we're not heading towards a day zero? I mean, you know, that was a Cape Town kind of language. We're not heading towards a day zero. That's not what our problem is. But the fact is that the integrated Vaal River system doesn't have enough water in it Lesotho is about 10 years late for a whole host of reasons that some, we're aware of. It's a problem. It is moving now. Hopefully it will come on stream. Having said that, recent research by the World Bank shows that due to climate change, even with Lesotho, we're still not safe. Temperatures are rising. So within the next 5 years, temperatures might rise by about 2%. Rainfall may still fall by 10%. We don't know, but they could. We have more disasters in Southern Africa due to climate change in Southern Africa than almost anywhere else in the world. So because we have a very tight supply and demand relationship, we have to be very careful. That's why the department is clamping down, because we need to get more sustainability in the system. So when people say, but there's water there, but it's like looking at the budget and saying, yeah, but there's money available. Why can't we just spend it all today? Well, because then there's next year. So, we need that sustainable system. We actually have 6% less in the Vol river system in the Vol dams than we've had over the past 3 years, just to make, people aware of that. That's all in the dashboard, by the way. Then there's this issue.
So is the dashboard in the red zone yet? Because when I checked last week, it was moving there pretty quickly.
Yeah, it's not the issue of red, but you don't want it to go in the red system is the point. What they're doing in the Department of Water and Sanitation is avoiding a kind of real crisis where you really don't have water. You just don't want to get there, right? You want to stop well before that happens. So, but anyway, that information is readily available and it compares year on year. So that's one bucket of issues. The second is that, of course, there's significant physical losses, and that's what is obviously on people's minds right now, is that there's a lot of outages, and there's a lot of problems in the municipal infrastructure. There's no doubt about that. The system loses about 35% of physical losses, which is basically leaks. So drinkable water just goes down the drain. Every single system loses, will always have leaks, but 15 to 20% would be okay. And we're at 35%. So obviously there's an effort to get it down. And obviously there's also significant theft of water and inefficient use on private property. But I think people present, let's just face it, our platform is really working on private use, but there's no doubt that top of mind is the municipal leak. So I'll speak to that. Now, institutionally, the critical issue that happened, to speak to what the Deputy Minister was saying, I forget when it was, but maybe 10, 15 years ago, functions were split in Johannesburg. So customer service, revenue collection, expenditure, those communications were split. And so you didn't have a single point of accountability. You also know that revenue earned from water isn't necessarily spent where it's supposed to be on water.
Yeah. We know that painfully.
Right. So significantly more could have been invested, even with the reasons that were there. So the history is splitting of accountabilities, the challenges around governance that we know, state capture, and the decline of capacity within government generally has hurt. So all of these kinds of things have hurt badly. Now that's a national problem, but it hit Johannesburg hard and it's hit the water system hard. Now the problem is, remember I used to work at telecom and
yes,
managing a copper network. I mean, that's, it was great because you could move on to mobile and LTE. You can't do that in the same way with water. But copper systems, they just constantly break. You're just constantly fixing it. The water system's a lot like that. You fix one side, the other side breaks. That's how it goes. The problem is when you leave it for many years at a time, then it's really a disaster, is the problem. So now, so the context is that there was like a 50% increase in non-revenue water, that thing I was just talking about, over the past decade or so, 30% increase in mains water bursts. And this is what you're experiencing now. And now it's hard to get a grip around it. Now, having said that, just to put into context, when I don't want to minute, look, I live in Cape Town, and in the next 2 days, the water's going to be off in my neighborhood, and I keep buckets in my house because the water's off and off. Okay, so I'm not making light of this, but just to say, if you look at the leaks and the actual amount of leaks that get fixed, in the past quarter, about 11,000 leaks were reported in Gauteng, in Joburg. About 10.3 thousand leaks were fixed. just to give context, in the past quarter, the backlog is now 753 leaks outstanding. The backlog at the end of last fiscal year, there were 4, like 1, 2, 3, 4 that were left. Those 4 people were angry, but there were 4 out of probably 11, tens of thousands. So you've got to realize also this is the scale of it. And those 700 people who are left hanging are bloody angry, understandably. But remember, it's within a context of over 10,000 having been fixed at that time, just to say. So I'm not making light of it. I'm just saying that you have to understand the physical context. Now let me widen out now. So the context now for fixing and what people might want to monitor.
So this is what people really want to know in ordinary language, what's being done.
Right. Okay. So I just wanted to contextualize that
sure.
story.
No, it's important, but I'm just telling you what people are saying.
Yeah, it's important for the fixing, you see, because you need to attend to the stuff. So the first thing is that Treasury's been driving a metro turnaround strategy. So it's got the city support program in Treasury has a program in the 8 metros, all 8 metros in the country for turnarounds. And then the Water and Sanitation departments specifically have turnaround strategies. Now, Johannesburg has a turnaround strategy that was approved by council recently, I think in the past year. The deputy minister might know, but I think it was this year that it was finally approved.
Just last week.
Oh, was it last week? Okay.
Yeah.
It's been happening for so long that, but it's a big deal. It's a big deal because I'm amazed that a council would put something like this through if you really want to know. Because what it does, and so Treasury's been driving that across the country, and Johannesburg's fully on board. And we're working as the platform hand in glove with Johannesburg very closely. So I'm in their offices with their executive once a week practically, just to give you an idea. So there's 5 elements within that. That is to create that single point of accountability. That means the revenue function moves over. That means the money goes to water infrastructure.
To water.
Yeah. And there's a single point accountability in terms of credit control, in terms of customer relations, in terms of revenue management, all of those things. There's only one person to blame. And that would be the MD of Joburg Water now. That's a very big deal. And it's quite surprising that any council would agree to that because they've just lost a great source of revenue. Okay, so it's a very big deal. So the finances are ring fenced too. The governance gets tightened up and it's very clear what has to happen according to King Core principles. There's a plan to increase investment from, I think it's about a current 1 billion or so to 3 billion by financial year 26. Investment in infrastructure, I mean. And then a plan to improve management and technical capacity. Now, there's also an initiative with the department that the deputy minister spoke about the premier's office for the past year, and that's what brought the platform in. The DG and the Minister of Water and Sanitation at the national level coordinate an intervention in Gauteng, as they do in eThekwini, by the way. So we have platforms in both areas. That's what we report into. And there's a whole convening that happens around Lesotho to when leaks get fixed. Now, there's 5 immediate actions that Joburg Water is focused on. Number 1, it's the pressure management that everybody's aware of between 4 p.m., 9 p.m. and 4 a.m.
So that's throttling our water, right?
Not exactly, but it's a similar idea. There's throttling and there's pressure management. Now, the idea is that at night, when the pressure when there's less pressure on the system and you've got a leak in a system and you're not even using the water, it sloshes out, right? So the idea is that at a time when you really don't necessarily need the water, then it doesn't really hurt people that much and you immediately reduce the water loss. So that's one of the immediate interventions that they can do. That's like straight away they get an improvement in water availability. Yes. Number 2, the capacity to fix leaks. There's a panel of contractors that can go around to be fixing leaks that they've expanded on, and they've expanded their fleet of trucks to go around, just as examples. 3, accelerated leak detection. So they've gone around already. I think they've surveyed 12,000 kilometers of pipe, and for preemptive fixing, and of various sorts. There have been thousands of fixes of various sorts as a result of this preemptive action. 4, you just saw that they're going on into illegal connections to get rid of illegal connections. it's not just the stealing of water. What happens when people dig into the system is that they destroy the main system. So it causes a lot of problems. It's not just the straight stealing, it's that issue. And then 5, to encourage private-public partnerships of different sorts and performance-based contracts to increase private investment and to reduce non-revenue water, basically to reduce.
Thank you, Miriam. Thank you so much for sharing those 5 points with us. So I'd like to share with you that we asked, we did a small poll with people on the call, said, have you experienced a water cut or water throttling? 73% said yes, 27% said no. So Deputy Minister Mahlobo, that's a very high number of people. So while we may say that Day Zero talk is Cape Town talk, and it was part of a campaign to deal with water shortages. In fact, the reality of people in Johannesburg and Gauteng is they often have day zeros, very, very often, where they don't have water. And getting through to a system that can help you in a way that's responsive and service-oriented is absolutely not our experience. So you obviously have great plans, but the reality, our reality on the ground, is very far from that. So would you like to respond?
We have to admit, Ferial, that we do have a big problem. I stay in Gauteng too, in Pretoria. There are challenges.
Have you been without water, Deputy Minister?
Oh, yeah, I did. One day my child phoned me and never spoke to me as a dad. She said she wants to speak to a Deputy Minister of Water. She wants to go to school, and her right to go to school was affected by the lack of water. Okay. What we have to appreciate is that now that we have mobilized this capability that exists in our own country, we have Miriam, we have Giselle, and others, including the World Bank. It's the right direction we take. We met with Johannesburg on Sunday with the Prime and the Minister. One of the things that their plan that they've approved, we have to prioritize certain things because we will not make an impact. There has to be the bigger goal that we have to reduce the usage from 1,600 that Johannesburg uses to an acceptable level. But to do that, one of the biggest things that we must admit, there is an infrastructure failure in Johannesburg. When there's an infrastructure failure, it's not going to happen overnight, Ferial. Because the point I made about what needs to be done, one of the issues that we need to do in certain instances, we have to do pipe replacement. When we are going to do pipe replacement or pipe refurbishment, you must have money. One of the biggest steps that has been made now is that this budget is going to be ring-fenced. In other words, the money from the water sales, which was used for miscellaneous, which was a wrong thing in terms of discipline. Then there's money that is also coming from grants, especially the USDG. It has the 33%, 1/3 of USDG, and Johannesburg gets about 2 billion of that amount. That money must be ring-fenced so that at least this backlog that you have of attending to infrastructure, when they have a 1 billion, they need more than 3 billion. And then what they could do, because there's an MTF, they can be able to do front loading of that particular money. Then we go and replace the pipes where there are the biggest leaks and there's the biggest impact. Then you put your flow meters, your restrictors that are there, you put the pressure reducing valves. Those communities can start to have water. Then they will have to move with speed around the question of building more reservoirs. Because the population has grown, you create a storage facility of more than 48 hours, even if there's this power supply interruption happening there. Those who are living in high-lying areas, you do booster pumps as a matter of agents. That's how it is the main issue that must happen. If it doesn't happen, you will still continue to lose 48%, which is non-revenue water, both in terms of the distributive system, including in people's homes. This is where the major crisis is. But then there are teams that Johannesburg Water, they've started to put a night shift and also the shift during the day. The problem that were there, I have one guy from Johannesburg as a resident, Mr. John Wilkinson. He writes to minister, all of us, and he keeps us to account to fix that in this corner, there's a problem. We need more of them to tell us. But the ability to respond timelessly on burst pipes, whether the biggest one that must be attended, that are caching, the small ones, the team is beginning to be there. I'm happy with what the mayor has done. Where is the weakness? Is the tools of trade. Do they have sufficient cars to run from one point to the other without disruption? Then Rainwater, our own entity, they have actually are giving them additional cars now, so they can be able to do that. But with the cars, without these other things of mechanical equipment, electrical equipment, you will not be able to fix the problem. This is the approach they must proceed with. Then there's an issue of the behavior of citizens. In Johannesburg alone, informal settlements, they were counting some few years ago about 208. Today,
yeah, I think it's up to 320 now, huh?
Now they're above 320. It's a biggest contingency of citizens that must be given water. They are encroaching on the lines, they are connecting illegally, the pressure is going down. That's why we're to make a decisive decision. Illegal connections must be attended to, while at the very same time, we provide water, because if we can stop illegal connection, we'll have water for citizens that used to have water yesterday. Some of these people are so daring that they are even illegally connecting on, what do you call this, to the reservoir. Imagine on a reservoir. And the reservoir can't hold water for a longer particular period. Then the issue of a dedicated ability of power generation is an important issue, because the system must be managed on a live basis. At a technical level, Rainwater meets with all metros in the morning and in the afternoon. They are looking at the levels of the system, how healthy it is. They do all these other things of the management of the system. And it's a very, very good approach. But without getting them additional money, Ferial, we can speak until the cows will come home. Therefore, the issue of moving to the SPV, going to the market, working with the World Bank, BRICS Bank, our partnership office, will have to get the money now for Johannesburg and the other municipalities, so that we can be able to return to the service for those who used to have a service before, while at the very same time we're building for CAPEX, new development, and new economic opportunities.
Thank you. We have plenty of questions, so I'm going to ask if we keep our answers a little bit faster, from Dr. Ferial Adam, who's our water warrior in chief in Johannesburg. She says it's more complicated than that. I think she's responding to your 5 points, Miriam, of leaks. There are many cases where leaks are reported, we're told they're fixed, but they haven't been fixed. So the system clearly isn't working. And what we're seeing is people need to tick boxes to show you that they are doing that they are satisfying the various requirements that you've placed for them. In fact, in our experience, it's not working that well. Henry Wilson, do we have any design thinking experts to draw the deputy? Are we using design thinking to get to root causes? It sounded to me like we are. From Mike, what is being done? I heard that very clearly from both people. Frederica Baxter asked an important question. What about the water mafia, the water tanker mafia, which I do think is an issue, because we've been told many times that in some areas the water tankers arrive before an unplanned cut. I also at this point want to ask about cadre deployment, because in the Johannesburg Water Board, the chairperson, for example, is a program officer at an NGO, into that position because she's a National Executive Committee member of the Young Communist League. I could go through that entire board and show you the same thing. On the whole Rand Water Board, there isn't a professionally qualified water engineer who sits on those boards. How much are systems of state capture, like cadre deployment, like water tanker mafia, how much are they still an issue, Deputy Minister? And Miriam, if you'd like to come in.
On the question of mafias, it's a serious phenomenon in South Africa. The attack on infrastructure, whether is it water, power generation, and so forth. In our own case, is a matter we're working with the law enforcement agencies. It has been prioritized now, Ferial. One of the things that has happened, in the past, they used to attack the wastewater network on the basis of illegal mining because they needed that wastewater to be able to do oxidation, extract the gold. It was happening mostly in Welkom, but also here in Gauteng. One of the things is that we wanted to look at the question of technology, because whatever kind of a technology, it must be in such a way that you don't actually entice them, like the stealing of copper. But at the very same time, the tankering thing is a thing that from a policy perspective, as a department, we don't want to encourage it. But if it is done, it must become temporary, not permanent. And it must be state-owned, because officials in government, they started to work together with the people who are actually in the water tankering business. They destroy the infrastructure, they destroy the valves. When they give the water through tankering, the municipality doesn't get revenue, but at the very same time, there are health risks. Because what will happen is that some of the water might be actually be in the black market. That will cause problems.
So Deputy Minister, but what's being done about it? Because it obviously is a big factor in our problems here. When I've asked Johannesburg Water to share what they're spending on water tankering and who's getting the contract so we can look at these things, they refuse to do so. Shouldn't there be greater transparency?
No, transparency is non-negotiable. They are starting to build their own fleet. But for a metro of this size in Johannesburg, a greatest metro in Africa, we want all citizens to get water from the tap. It's only those areas in the periphery where there is no infrastructure at all, where we can use tankering. Imagine in a suburb, you bring in a tanker, is not properly coordinated. It comes at a time when people are not here, they are not there at work, but at the very same time, other people are vulnerable, the elderly. How will they be able to go to do that? Because there's also issues of water hogging. But it should actually become a temporary measure, because even if you look at the quantum of the money we use, that money could have been used to actually build infrastructure, do this pipe replacement, put the technologies that are there, build more reservoirs, and do some of those issues.
Thank you.
But at the very same time on water, we're insisting on professionalization. One of the things that I know as a technical person myself, that MD of Johannesburg Water is highly qualified. But the institutional delegation, the support you are supposed to get, what Miriam was saying, is the direction to professionalize, give them the tools of trade with less interference, because we must be able to allow experts to speak with degree of confidence on the issues they know. That's why even in our own department, in as much as I was trained in water, I don't want to claim that I have a monopoly. That's why they are professional people who have done it before. We work together so that we can pool those resources.
I understand it's uncomfortable to maybe answer, but I do want to say that I find it, I see how cadres are being deployed onto the Johannesburg Water Board, and I do think it's something that requires attention. But Miriam, what about the fact that you don't have enough qualified water engineers on the crucial boards of the Johannesburg Water and Rand Water? The other municipalities run on different systems. And if you can also take Ferial's question from earlier, please.
Sorry, what was the earlier question?
The earlier question, she said that the system of leaks reporting isn't working as well as you had suggested, that sometimes we get told leaks have been fixed and they haven't been. And I'm suggesting that people are giving you reports because that's what you require of them.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Well, let's start there. There's no doubt that the system of reporting isn't what it needs to be anywhere. So not just in Joburg Water, we're working. One of the things we're doing in the platform, at some point in the talk, I hope we'll talk a little bit about what the platform's doing. But one of the things we're doing, so now we're working in 4 metros, basically, is Joburg, Tshwane, and Ekurhuleni, and eThekwini. And the system of reporting is very uneven, and the technical knowledge is uneven, and certainly we're bringing the 4 metros together to learn across. So Strangely, eThekwini has an incredible app, actually, where you can post up a picture, you can say exactly where the leak was, it'll tell you when the leak was fixed, and actually very little integration across those functions either, because they also don't have a single point of accountability and all these governance issues. And they're also on the way, based on Treasury push, to do the same thing. So there's no doubt that there's a problem in communication. It's one of the things that we're trying to strengthen. So some of the facilitation we do brings Joburg Water to areas where they're introducing pressure management, bring people together so they know where to report, how to communicate. They get to understand a little bit better about what Joburg Water is doing. And you start to reset the relationship so that people are actually, it's not perfect, but at least they're talking to each other. And then they can talk about when things aren't going well. But there's no doubt that the system of reporting in and getting feedback isn't working as it should. And as she's saying, sometimes, even in Cape Town, by the way, in my neighborhood over here, leaks are stated as fixed, and actually they're not. And what you need is stronger feedback loops, because to ensure that that doesn't happen. So I'm reporting. You can say it's not as simple as what I'm saying. I'm just trying to give you the scale of what they're working within.
Sure.
Now, what I've learned in the past week is the metric, and when I was at Telecom, this is the kind of thing we fixed as well. I learned that the metric that is required and for these officials is time to respond to a leak reported. And the feedback I gave to not 2 days ago was, I think the metric should be fixed, like time to fix. We actually had to change that KPI when I was at Telecom. It was exactly the same problem.
So time to fix, not time to respond, because they're different things.
Yeah, you want to know how fast it took to respond, but what I learned is what the metros are required to report on. I just learned this in the past couple of days. And this is the kind of thing you learn in this kind of process. You ask these stupid questions, just like basic questions. And it turns out that they have to report how long it took to get there, but not how long it took to fix. And that's certainly something that we're going to have to work on, and that they are working on. And so it is very imperfect, but then the positive thing is that we're in discussion and doing something about it.
I must say, getting the revenues back to Joburg Water and also the single point of accountability, that's a significant change. Deputy Minister, did you want to come in there? I've got a lot of engineering questions for you.
When it comes to rainwater, they have the best combination of various skills. I know for a fact, with a very top CEO that we grew together from the water space in the then Department of Water and Forests as young scientists. But we must be able to say that there should never be any interference or deployment in all these technical functions. We want the best of the best, that they know their trade and the philosophy of working in that particular space. And I will be in a position that we will discuss the matter in the previous meeting and check whether the board, in terms of the Johannesburg Water Board, whether it has the right mix. But in terms of the technical expertise around those who work in Johannesburg Water, as I was saying, they have an engineer there, highly qualified. But as I was saying, my own experience of interacting with them and the quality and credible plans they've produced is the issues whether the institutional mechanism was adequate for them to perform. They are given more powers now. Secondly, is the resource mobilization. They don't have the sufficient resources. Like I was talking about issues of cars that we're giving them, but at the very same time, the ability to respond on the issues of the leaks. Now we must be able to have a financial turnaround plan. How are they going to build a revenue on the basis of the service that they're going to provide? But then there must be an accountability framework so that at least there is transparency, because this water is being managed for the public good and citizens. Is not a favor to inform them. Where is the level of the system every day? They are attending this. And then so that we have those performance-based contracts as part of the reforms. If they don't perform well, then the license, the department will withdraw it, and then we intervene.
Thank you. Ingrid Bester, who's another water warrior in Johannesburg, you can almost feel her frustration when she says, what is the accountability mechanism? Can we lay criminal charges against them? So how do we fix that accountability mechanism? Because it's often a one-way communication street with no ability to interact in the way that we are now, for example.
One of the things we said in the last meeting, because of how big is the matter of changing the current situation in Johannesburg, we have asked that the Premier, when there's revised the plan, because on Sunday, the approved plan, there are certain pillars that needs to be strengthened in resource mobilization. They have to convene meetings of citizens, even various stakeholders, and be able to say, this is our turnaround plan. Because remember, there are three elements, Ferial, I said the question of behavioral change and the role and relationship of citizens, the issues around tariffs and water restriction and technical component. If we don't share the plan, how are we going to account? That's the only mechanism that we can be able to see while making a plan. When they dealt with the Cape Town plan to respond to a crisis of a drought, that's how they worked. The very same thing we did when we were involved in the Nelson Mandela Bay, when there are those particular problems. And accountability and being transparent, it helps you to improve, because you can't always be on your toes and will not be in a position to say they must hide. Then citizens, we are violating their human rights if we don't provide water. And we must be able to know that ultimately citizens have a responsibility, that if we don't respond well, they can go to court. The number of organizations that have gone to court, and then they force government to intervene. But we don't necessarily need to be spending money if our attitude says that we want to co-create, want to cooperate, resolve the problem, and spare no effort in actually saying, these are the milestones we're achieving. If we don't achieve them, we communicate why, and then be able to say, what is the role?
Well, we're certainly going to keep people to that. I hope Ingrid and others from the crisis group are listening. So I'm going to whip through some questions because there's lots from F. Esrich. I hope I say your name right. So engineering infrastructure of a lifespan of 30 years needs 3% of it replaced every year. That hasn't happened. So how are we going to catch up, I guess, is the question. Have we started locating the pipes where you'll fix the most leaks? And is there a preventative maintenance inspection schedule? This is a question I've always asked and never gotten an answer, because it feels like we're always working in emergency mode. So this is for either of you to answer those questions.
You know, I asked in our engagement to say, do they know where these pipes are? Because it's the first question. Remember, they are buried underground.
Yes.
And in certain instances, because of unplanned development, some of these pipes, people have encroached into the network.
Yes.
Therefore, one of the biggest assignments is to be able to find the pipes. The report we got is that there are more than 12,000 distributive network in terms of kilometers. But they must find them and answer the question, what is their condition? Are they still having some life that we can refurbish, which is the 2 Rs? Those who don't have, that doesn't have life, what do? You replace them. And it's an important exercise, and technology is very available. But then they must be able to say, where are the gashing holes in terms of the best, where there are these small issues. You can be able to do your remote sensing. Is an important step, because if you miss that step, Neferre, you will not be able to address this particular problem. Then the next question is to say, where will the money come from? Then there's existing traditional funding we've spoken about. The water sales are them, the grants are them. You can be able to make a determination, working with National Treasurer, like we're working with this partnership office, working with the World Bank and other financing institutions. We do a once-off refurbishment of the infrastructure. We actually even have to go to households of indigenous people where council can make a similar decision, because there are also leaks in people's homes. Then we go there and we deal with that. Then there's public facilities that are managed by government and public works. There's too much losses on those toilets, and the other issues happening in schools, in the courts and everything. That's the approach that must be made. When we said they must tighten the plan, we want that level of the detail, because we can speak so strategically, but if we don't get into work breakdown schedule to say on week one, what problem are we solving? What is an impact? That's the overhaul we must go through.
Absolutely, I'm with you. Warwick is asking, is the water treatment plant at Ritvlei working? And if so, at what capacity? That may be too technical, but do either of you have an answer on that?
I have to check. I just got reported on in one of our WhatsApp groups. But so
okay,
I would have to check. Wait,
thank
Ferial,
you.
You asked.
So I do want to ask you about the platform now. It's an excellent platform. And thank you to everybody who do that, because there we have it at a glance. Ingrid is asking, could you please share reservoir levels with residents daily and not through our ward councillors? Because that would really, really be helpful to people's lives. But take it away, Miriam. Tell us about the platform.
Well, just as an example, we share reservoir levels once a week, and not through ward councillors. It's available on the DWS website. I've provided the link, so you get it then. And we issue something every Friday. It's either a weekly or a monthly dashboard.
So all the reservoir levels are on there.
Yeah, and then we have.
We'll have to consider it, Miriam. In our work, you are supporting us. Let's have a discussion in your war room. Let's give our daily updates, because it's the right thing to do, so that at least citizens can plan. But in the meantime, like she's saying, Ferial, there is that particular platform. I know, for an example, as a deputy minister, I do get the levels from rainwater every day, but I need to have a site on the municipal system. But let's look at it, how feasible it is, and then so that at least we can have a sense how we are managing the system. That's not too much to ask.
So,
information is empowerment. It helps. I've seen how it helps communities deal with the crisis.
But we must warn people when they get the numbers, they must not misread them.
Yeah.
In terms of our standard operating procedure, the reservoir is in a healthy state between 60 to 80%. But it's not always that point, because it might be at 80%, but the size of the reservoir, the volumes, might be very low. But it might be at around 40%. Then people will think that we're not managing the system well, because it's at 40% or 30%. But you might find that the volumes are sufficient. As we look now, the valve system is at 83%, but it does not mean that there's a crisis. It can only become a problem at 18%.
So we must learn water literacy, because when you tell me 33%, I go, oh my God. So I see what you mean. Miriam, you were going to say about the platform?
Sure. So, and happy to answer some of the other questions. I don't want you to think I'm diverting away from your board question, because it's incredibly important. But the platform, just quickly, the DG of Water and Sanitation approached the World Bank Water Resources Group to set up a multi-stakeholder water security platform, which they've done in places like Bangladesh and Kenya and Colombia and various parts of the world. There's about 15 globally. And I was asked to convene this one in Gauteng, and we've also set one up in eThekwini. And it brings together the main parties, like the CEO of Rand Water, MD of Joburg Water, but basically the 3 metros, 6 water service authorities in Gauteng, like Mfuleni, those kinds of areas. City support program and treasury as examples. Private sector is your typical organized business like BUSA and say BLSA, but also we've dug deep into the property sector, because basically what we've done is we've tried to work out who's using water. How do we get to that point about the ward councillor? You want to work with ward councillors, but our idea is to get directly to people who use water. So we work with like city improvement districts. We work with ratepayers associations, religious groups and churches, religious organizations.
So you get together and you
and then
you meet and you.
No.
No, I know you don't just meet, but I mean you think together.
Yeah. So no. It's very targeted actually. So firstly, that's the approach we've taken, is that we mapped out organizations that have reach. So that problem of not getting information, you start to get peer-to-peer information, which I think is more powerful. So that's the one thing in terms of the approach. The second thing is it's very action-orientated. So our first milestone, we're focused on water demand, and we're focused currently on the RAND water target, which is to save 10%. So our top line goal, so when we meet, when the leadership platform meets, all we talk about is what we're going to do. There's no speeches, no ribbon cutting, nothing. 10% is the top goal. And then what are we going to do? So number one view of the information, because you'd be amazed. When I started this in February this year, there wasn't one view of the information within government. I sat in meetings where RAND Water, DWS, and the metros had a different view of what was going on. I've seen that before in turnarounds. It's very typical of a situation like this.
So you created the one view. We have like 1 minute, but we will do this again.
Okay, so we have the dashboard that I would urge people to use, and it's meant to also curate the information, and we check it out and research it, etc. And the big thing is that we're going to be launching a major communication awareness campaign, society-wide, and then leveraging these networks is the big idea. Yeah.
Thank you. I hope we'll chat some more in the new year. Last word to you, Deputy Minister, and thank you for answering on the WhatsApp group as well. I do want to ask Mark's question is, we can't just cut off the water to the 320 informal settlements. That would be cruel and inhuman. What's our plan there? And if you would just like to end on a note of what we can expect, say, between now and January, because it's going to be a tough time.
The issues around dealing with illegal connection, it does not take away the responsibility for government to find a mechanism to provide water to those communities, because that's what the Constitution compels us to do. What you will see over the next few weeks, there will be continuous leadership at the level of the minister, the premier, the president, and the deputy president. There will be technical support that are provided by the teams of RAND Water, the partnership office and the platform that has been created where Miriam and the others are working. But at the very same time, we'll be throwing more experts. We'll also be bringing more private sector because they have the biggest role to play, both in terms of funding, but we'll also engage more communities because there are a lot of water inefficiencies that are happening in our households, but at the very same time on government assets. But I'm very, very content that this problem we're facing is not insurmountable. We have the capacity, if we work together, like they did in Cape Town. There was going to be a necessary inconvenience and changes on certain things, also in Nelson Mandela. But I don't want to promise short-term solutions. It's going to take us time. The decay, especially from an infrastructure component, has been allowed for over a long period. And this is where the major point is. Other issues, they will have to be done, but it will keep the system remain vulnerable. As I say today, the system remain vulnerable. Those who use more, they must be able to come to the party and spare the effort to do well. But those who don't have a drop, we have a responsibility to reach them. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll end with this final comment from James Bernstein. My wife and I used 110 liters each. We take showers together. It saves water, improves our relationship. More people should do that. Thank you very much. Thank you both for sharing your time and taking us right into those forums. I certainly do pray that those plans that you've laid out for us do happen. And please do look at the platform. It's truly excellent. Thank you very much. We chat in the new year. Good night.
All the best. Thank you very much. Thank you so much to Miriam and yourself. And